Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Life's Legends, a podcast where we talk about the stories that have shaped and guided us through life. This month is Lord of the Rings month, and I am here with my great friend, Daniel. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
So, there's going to be spoilers for the Lord of the Rings movies. So if you haven't seen those movies, first, what are you doing? Go do that. They're long, I know. They're long, I know, but it's so worth it. Just get in there. And then come back. Immediately come back after that and watch these episodes. We're also, if you've watched the other episodes, we're doing something a little bit different. We're breaking this up. Hopefully, that gives us a little more time to, actually talk about stuff. Hopefully. So, Daniel, we've got some questions. We've got some intro questions for you. So first of all, how old are you?
I'm 26 years old. I'll be turning 27 in July.
There we go. Very nice. Daniel, what's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal is a cat. We have two cats back home. One of them is very, very affectionate. Her name's Liza Jane. The other is named Maeve, and we're going to be talking about orcs and goblins later on. Maeve is what you call a couch goblin. She hides under the couch and you just see these beady eyes staring out at you. So she's a couch goblin, but that's okay. Other than that, she's nice. But yes, cats are my favorite animal. Sorry to all the dog people out there. I like dogs too, but cats are where it's at.
First of all, I don't know that I knew your favorite animal was a cat. And secondly, you came prepared on that question.
Well, I had some time to think about it, you know. And as soon as I saw a goblin, I was like, "Oh, this is a perfect opportunity," you know.
Yeah.
It segues in just naturally.
Yeah. So you got a couch goblin at home?
Yes.
That's good. Okay, Daniel, what's your occupation?
So currently, I am a pastor in the Methodist Church, and I'm also a seminary student as well. I'm attending Asbury Theological Seminary part-time, mostly online, but I do go down for intensives from time to time. My hope is to graduate in May of 2025, so hopefully 2 more years. But yeah, my main call right now is I'm just serving God in the church and serving His people in the church, and learning through seminary as well. That's where God's called me in this time of life.
And lastly, Daniel, what is your dream? What's your dream for the future?
So my dream for the future, my hope is to eventually become ordained and become an ordained elder in the Methodist Church. But also, it's something really I'm just open to whatever the Lord might have in store. It's something where I've thought about other people have mentioned this to me as well. Talked about maybe pursuing a doctorate at some point down the road. Maybe teaching. I really enjoy teaching, so maybe being a professor or something like that somewhere down the road. I would emphasize the down the road part because that's
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff that I'm doing right now. Raising a family is definitely one of the biggest ones among them right now. But just trying to take it one day at a time and see what God has in store.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, you definitely have the brain for it. You could definitely do a doctorate. I believe that. But probably let's do the MDiv first, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
But that's great. That's great to hear.
That's very kind of you to say, Luke.
Oh, yeah. Well, I pretend to be a nice guy. So, this podcast is all about stories and what they mean for us and how they've shaped us and stuff like that. And so I like to give an opportunity for my guests to shout out something either you're currently experiencing or you just like as well, and you want maybe the listeners to check that out too.
So it can be like a movie or a book or anything like that.
Yeah, anything you want.
You're gonna like this one, I think. A story I'd like to shout out is the live action version starring Jim Carrey of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It is such an underrated movie. All right, I know it is so different from, the cartoon version that we all grew up with. I understand that, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. But oh my goodness, there are so many powerful points in that movie. It's hilarious, but it also contains, a critique of, the secularized Christmas that we often, experience. Like, you just have to watch it. It's funny. It has some deep and profound scenes in it. Like, I know we're pretty far away from Christmas, but you can watch it any time of year. So I would shout out the Jim Carrey version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
That's incredible. I'm almost scared with how prepared you are for these questions, because these are the ones that don't matter. And you're ready to go. You're ready to go. That's great. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. My shout out this month, a little different, is so I've been watching through, I don't know if you've heard of the show Better Call Saul. It's related to Breaking Bad. So I've been watching through it. The final season just got released on Netflix. I'm not even done with the final season, so I hesitate even to shout it out like this, but I loved Breaking Bad, and I really like Better Call Saul. I like it maybe as much as Breaking Bad, so that's the one I wanted to shout out. We're here to talk about Lord of the Rings. So, what made you choose Lord of the Rings for this podcast?
So, I think the biggest thing, it's just my favorite story. Like, it's a story that I first, encountered it in high school. I remember, my dad telling me, about it a little bit and telling me, it was such a big part of high school for me. And so I picked up the books and started reading. I'm like, wow, this is everything that is advertised. This is an epic story. It draws you in. There's a huge detailed world, and the way Tolkien writes is, amazing. So, I started with the books and read those, and then, started into the films. I was born in 96, and so I was in high school, about a decade or so after the movies came out. But then I watched the movies, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this helps to bring what I read in the books to life. And yes, there are some differences, and there are always, differences that exist between the books and between the movies. But I was very impressed with how faithful the movies were to the books, and how the movies really brought to life that detailed world and that epic story that you find in the book. So yeah, I guess the biggest reason I chose it is just because I love the story. I love the world in which it takes place. I love the strong characters and the strong plot points and the epic scenes in the movies. The music is absolutely phenomenal. I think we're going to probably talk about that a little bit later on. And on top of all of it, J.R.R. Tolkien was a Christian, and he definitely infused some Christian parallels and morals into his story, and it's amazing to see how those play themselves out, and how even in the movies a lot of those are preserved. So
yeah, I watched these movies I think when I was in high school. I had the books read to me as a kid. I think my mom read the Lord of the Rings books to me when I was a little kid, but I didn't remember much of that story, and I definitely watched the movies with my grandma, actually, in high school. Shout out to Nana. When I was in high school, she really loves these stories too, but I hadn't revisited it very much at all since then, and it was a blast to watch them again. It was great. I had forgotten so much, and so it was great to get back in there. I was glad that you picked it. So let's get to one of our listener questions. One of the great things about now doing 3 episodes a month is we have 3 listener questions. This is one of them. So, if you could choose a race to be in this world, any of the races, which one would you pick?
I know for me, so here's the thing. A lot of people are like, oh, the elves, they get to live forever. They're so cool and everything. In the books, Tolkien basically says, yeah, to be an elf is not that fun because basically you get to see all the evil of the world, and you're just kind of you just kind of experience more grief, I guess, than anything. So, and then the dwarves are cool, but like, I don't know. Do you really want to just hide in your mountain all the time, just digging for treasures and stuff like that? I feel like you get bored. I feel like you get claustrophobic. I guess honestly, honestly for me, I'd either want to be a man, Rohan, Gondor, those kingdoms are just so noble and so cool, or just be a hobbit. Who doesn't want to sit around and be able to have like 6 or 7 meals a day, and live in this beautiful green country where you just kind of garden and you can just enjoy peace and quiet and good tilled earth, as he says. So either a man or a hobbit, one of the two.
Yeah. See, I would have absolutely picked elf as really probably through college. I would have picked an elf. Now, man, I just want to be a hobbit. I just want to be doing exactly what you said, just enjoying that tilled earth. That I definitely think, and we'll probably get into this at some point, that there's a lot of instances with the elves that it seems like Tolkien is specifically saying, like, yeah, you don't really want to be immortal. There's some downsides,
right.
To that. So yeah, I think I would say Hobbit. So I think it's always good. Every story has a protagonist and an antagonist, and so let's start with the protagonist, Frodo. How do you feel about Frodo? What are your thoughts on Frodo?
Yeah, Frodo is like, he's an interesting character. He's a very complex character, I feel like, in a lot of ways. Like both in the books and in the movies. I think we're focusing on the movies here in this podcast, but I feel like even in the books he's kind of a complex character too. Like he can be very brave, but also he has his moments of weakness. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, like, on one hand, like in Moria, like you see him, like he's like charging at the orcs, and he's going at them. Then on Weathertop, he trips over his own feet and falls on the ground. And maybe in some ways it just kind of shows, like, he's real. Like, we all have our good moments, we all have our bad moments. We make good decisions sometimes, like, letting Sam come along. That was a really good decision that Frodo made. And he also had the wisdom and foresight to see that, the ring was eventually going to tear the Fellowship apart, so he knew that he needed to leave and go on his own. But then he makes the bad decisions too. Like, he becomes in many ways, like too, I don't know how you want to say, maybe too sympathetic towards Gollum. He sees how the ring corrupted Gollum, and he's a ring bearer too, so he knows what it's like. So he's just so quick to forgive Gollum and to trust him, and obviously that ends up costing them later down the road.
Right.
But I guess, yeah, Frodo overall is he's a complex character, and maybe in some ways a real character. We often look to the protagonist to just be the perfect goody two-shoes guy, that always makes the perfect choices and always does what's right. But Frodo's not quite there. So, and that's an interesting, I guess, facet about him.
Yeah, he's an interesting protagonist. I'm with you on that 100%. So as I was watching, I was unclear about why it seemed very important that Frodo is the ring bearer. Like, it was very important that it was him, even to the point that, like, we get into the third movie, and, like, Sam, who's been here the whole time, is clearly, I would say most people would probably agree, is pure-hearted, stout, even optimistic, but he can't do it. Even he's not supposed to carry the ring, right? It's Frodo's job, and this is, like, understood. What is it? What's going on there? Do you know? Do you have any ideas or anything like that?
I know he was the one at the Council of Elrond who, let's go back to the beginning of the movie. the ring passes from Bilbo to Frodo. Frodo inherits the ring from his uncle Bilbo, and so he has the ring. And now this is before Gandalf knows that this is the One Ring of Power, which houses all of Sauron's power.
Yeah. It's a big deal, I would say.
Right. But something where Frodo has the ring, and he can't give it to Gandalf because Gandalf doesn't want to be tempted by its power. And then Frodo has to hold on to it and keep it safe, and get out of the Shire and eventually get it to Rivendell. And then at the Council of Rivendell, he's chosen. In many ways, it's just he says, I'm willing to do it. As he sees all these people arguing, about what to be done with the ring, and Gimli, saying like, never trust an elf. I'll be dead before I see the ring in the hand of an elf. And you have Boromir, who's tempted by it. You have men and elves and dwarves just all kind of, fighting over it. Frodo just says, I will take it. I will take the ring to Mordor. I don't know the way, but I'll take the ring. So I guess I think probably the reason why Frodo is the best candidate to bear the ring is because he's just it comes to him. He is willing to bear it, and also this is I guess it's touched a little bit on in the movie as well, that Elrond mentions that Frodo has shown an extraordinary resilience to the ring's evil. And hobbits kind of, for some reason, have this natural tendency that they're not corrupted by the ring as easily. They still are. I mean, Smeagol, Gollum is a pretty good example of how even hobbits can become corrupted.
Yeah, that didn't go great for him.
No, it did not. But I guess probably that would be why Frodo is probably the best candidate. Why he carries the ring, because it came to him, he was willing, and hobbits have this kind of resilience. They're not tempted in the same way that men are, or other races.
I like that among this race of very peace-loving, hobbits seem like, as we said earlier, very just living in this time at peace. Frodo's got a little bit of adventure spirit in him, and I think this is true of probably all the hobbits, maybe with the exception of Sam, who sometimes seems like he just wishes he could go back. But Merry and Pippin also are definitely into the adventure, which seems like they're almost outcasts as hobbits because of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you read the books, hobbits don't go on adventures. If you read in the book, The Fellowship of the Ring, there are lengthy paragraphs where you'll have the gaffers and the old hobbits sitting in the bars and stuff like that, and they're just these young little rascals going off on adventures. What are they doing? What do they know?
Yeah, they're not having it.
Exactly.
It's so funny. Yeah, it definitely seemed like that. They didn't even have that text from the book that would outline that. There's one guy in the garden, and he gives them this grim face in the beginning, and then he does it when they get back.
When they get back at the end, yeah.
They've saved all of the known world, and the guy's still just I don't know about them. It's very funny. It's very fun. But there's something about that spirit, that starts the hero's journey for Frodo in this story. I think he's a very interesting protagonist, and it's cool to follow.
Yeah.
Even towards the end, where he's getting to be a little less mentally with us.
Yeah.
It's still very interesting to follow, and you see how kind of heavy a weight that is.
Yeah, the ring takes its toll, as things go on, but that's why he has Sam, with him to help him, during that time. Yeah.
Moving along, let's talk about the antagonist. There are a couple, at least that I felt were antagonist-like. So, first off, I guess I'll say, the first kind of face that we have as an antagonist. How do you feel about Saruman? Am I saying that name right?
Yeah, Saruman. That's the.
Okay.
Yeah, don't be like Ralph Bakshi and say Aruman. Just don't, please.
Aruman? What? How did you get Aruman?
Ralph. This is a little off topic. Ralph Bakshi made a animated version of Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
And he thought that Sauron and Saruman sounded too similar, so he changed Saruman's name into Aruman. Which, okay, I can see why he did it, but
Yeah.
it just does not work. So please don't do that.
Well, yeah, that's not his name. They are similar, but yes, Saruman. Wow, I just did it. I just did it. We just talked about it. Anyway. The White Wizard.
Yes, the White Wizard.
How do you feel about him as an antagonist?
Yeah, Saruman, he's also an interesting character. So, in many ways, he's kind of a sad character, because we know it's talked about in the books quite a bit, but we see it in the movies too. He was originally good. He was originally part of... he's part of the 5 wizards, part of the White Order that was dedicated to protecting Middle-earth. He's the head of Gandalf's order. He's Gandalf's trusted friend. He's originally good. He would originally walk through the forests of Fangorn, Treebeard, who we'll talk about later. He said, there was once a time when Saruman would walk through my woods, but now he has a mind of metal. Okay, so Saruman was originally good, but the problem is he made the mistake of looking into the Palantir, that black orb, and he saw Sauron's strength, and he decided to join evil rather than fight against it. Whereas, Gandalf says, we must counter him, we must resist Sauron. Saruman just gets it in his head because he looks through the Palantir, and because Sauron is that way too, he kind of has this way of trying to discourage you. Saruman just comes to the conclusion of, we must join him, Gandalf. We must join with Sauron. It would be wise, at least as wise in his eyes. Of course, Gandalf is like, when did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness? As we're all going there, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But he is a sad character in that way that, he was originally good, but he let Sauron's strength intimidate him and sway him over to the other side.
Yeah, I think you could see in the beginning of the first movie, this is definitely not a thing Gandalf expected. So
yeah.
Whatever relationship they had, and I'm sure the books do expound on this much better, but whatever relationship they had, Gandalf wouldn't have expected this of Saruman.
Right.
Which is, it's kind of sad in a way, but I can almost understand the idea, right? Because he looked like he saw that power. So yeah, he's interesting. Gives kind of that. I honestly think that most antagonists anymore, for sure, have this I'm really a good guy in a bad guy's clothes. Because there's always some kind of deep good reason,
Yeah.
something taken too far. I'm thinking Thanos is I'm trying to make sure everything keeps going, and that's why I want to do this. And Saruman's kind of in this vein, but not the main antagonist at all.
Right.
Versus this story, I think, has a clearly evil main antagonist.
Yeah.
But before we get to him, the Witch King of Angmar. Am I saying that one right?
Yep, you are.
2 for 2. I actually didn't think at the beginning. I was wondering how to talk about the Ring Wraiths as a collective, and there's oh, one of them has a name. So how do you feel about him, his role in that last movie, and really anything you think about him?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Witch King of Angmar, yet again, it's another, in some ways, kind of a tragic character. He was once, we saw from the very beginning, 9 rings were given. Aragorn explains it too, that 9 rings were given to the 9 kings of men. They were blinded by greed and took them, and then eventually they just kind of, because of the influence of those 9 rings, eventually they transformed into these ring wraiths, neither living nor dead, without form, and slaves to Sauron, really, that they're bound to serve him. So again, kind of a tragic character, but like Saruman, just pure evil.
Yeah.
I mean, the Witch King of Nazgul, and the Witch King in particular, nasty. I mean, stabs Frodo in the shoulder, almost turning him into a ring wraith at Weathertop. And then later on, he leads the armies of Mordor against the free peoples of the world, and especially against Gondor. Just merciless, and he is just one bad dude,
Yeah.
and he's pretty intimidating. I mean, when you see him fighting Eowyn, like, you would not want to go up against him. He's just rotten and cruel and just merciless.
Yeah, that the giant flail.
Yeah.
That's an intimidating weapon. I'm sitting there like, from a practical standpoint, this is not that great of a weapon, but he's swinging that thing around, and I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah, he's definitely intimidating. And I like what you said about both him and Saruman, to kind of clarify, just in case people were confused. They're definitely evil. It's not, but it's like there's a tragic tone here. Mm-hmm. They weren't always evil,
right?
But have turned from the big guy, the big baddie, and the main antagonist. How do you feel about Sauron?
Sauron, he's the biggest baddie of them all, pretty much. So I will say this, like, I won't get into this too much, but even Sauron was once kind of a good guy. If you go back into like the Silmarillion, which is like the prequel to both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, Tolkien actually talks about how like Morgoth was the first like big bad Dark Lord, and Sauron was swayed by Morgoth and was slave to him. And there's this kind of this idea that like even Sauron at one point wasn't necessarily all bad. But I mean, that's not really brought out in the movies though, so I won't go too much into that.
But that's good. I mean, that's good insight to have too about him though.
Right. But the thing is though, Sauron, he is just evil. He is
no kidding.
He wants to rule over all of Middle Earth and to slave others to his will, and he is willing to do whatever is necessary to accomplish that. It's something where he wants to have full rule and full dominion over all of Middle Earth, and he won't stop until he gets that. I mean, the reason he made that one ring was so that he could, try and have that power over the other rings as well, so that he could, sway all of Middle Earth to his rule. And I think what I find compelling about Sauron too is, from a Christian perspective, Sauron I think is a reflection in many ways of the tendency that we as humans have, that we want to control and rule over the world around us as well, at least in some ways. We might not admit it at first, or we might think like, oh, well, it's not that bad, but deep down, all of us want to have some kind of control. We want to be able to control the world around us. We want to have rule. We want to have dominion. And so I feel like it's something where when we look at Sauron, like, in some ways, like, we're looking at, like, this is what it looks like when we as humans take, our self-interest to the extreme. This is if it's allowed to flourish and to fester, like, this is what that sinful nature within us looks like. This, if you give it to someone who's extremely powerful, you get a Sauron. That was just kind of my thought as I was reflecting on Sauron. I'm like, yeah, he's like he's like a picture of like the worst of us in some ways.
I got a question. I don't know if you have the answer or know the answer. This is not on our list. And I told you I wouldn't do that to you, but here I am doing it to you.
Come on, Luke, really? No, I'm kidding.
Do we know what Sauron is?
So Sauron is...
Like race-wise, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, he is... I'm trying to remember what the actual name is. So Morgoth was a Valar, which was basically like one of the lesser gods beneath the one god Iluvatar.
Oh wow, this gets really deep.
So there's like the Valar, which are like kind of like lesser gods, and then there's another level below that. I think they're called the Ainur, maybe.
Okay.
This is where I wish I had my brother Joey, because he could like spout it off just like that.
It's kind of locked down.
My brother Joey is also a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but basically he's on the level below like the lesser gods. So actually, like Gandalf, I think, is also an Ainur.
Okay.
I can't say it.
Ainur. I can't pronounce the names.
Yeah, it gets difficult. But I think actually him and Gandalf are on a similar level. But I think Sauron is kind of bigger and badder.
Yeah.
He was, I think, the most powerful of the Ainur, especially the evil ones under Morgoth.
Gotcha.
So so he's definitely very powerful.
Yeah.
Of course, we see, without the One Ring, his power is limited. That's why he's so desperate to get it back. But even, I mean, it's something where Saruman himself says, he cannot take physical form, but his spirit has lost none of its potency.
Yeah. That was a scary quote.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was definitely foreboding. Yeah, that was scary.
Could I add one other character who is kind of a villain? A lot of people who watch Lord of the Rings will say, "Oh yeah, he's definitely a villain," and I think you can make a case he is. Denethor. Denethor is he's kind of a villain of sorts. He is he's a jerk to Faramir.
Yeah. Yes.
He is like the worst. He gets the worst Dad of the Year award
by 4.
Yeah, move over, Darth Vader. Move over, like whoever else. Like Denethor wins worst Dad of the Year award.
Oh, he's such a bad dad.
He is. But like, I wanted to just say too, we've talked about how there's a tragic element to the villains, and I think even with him too, there's another tragic element there. He also looks into a Palantir, and kind of follows a path similar to Saruman. He doesn't outright join Sauron, but when he sees the strength of Mordor, he just kind of becomes cynical. He kind of becomes hopeless. He just says, against the power that's risen in the east, there can be no victory, and that just drives him into despair and then eventually into madness. But I feel like it's something where it's kind of a tragic story, but he's definitely, I think you could make the case that he's pretty evil. So
yeah, he ain't good. I was like sitting there watching the third movie, right? And he's like he's putting oil on himself, or like, I mean, I'm gonna say it's probably not gasoline, but he's putting a flammable liquid, I assumed, on himself and his living son, who's still in this pile. I was like, oh, this is bad. And like, you could tell kind of right from the jump. I think as soon as Pippin and Gandalf go into him, you're like, this guy's not going to be our friend.
No, you can tell like there's something off here already. I mean, to be fair, he had just received news that Boromir, his oldest son, was dead. So I mean, you can kind of see like he was starting to crack a little bit at that point. But again, a tragic character, but I think you could make the case that he's evil.
Yeah. Yeah. He needs help. Definitely needs help.
Why didn't they just have a therapist at Minas Tirith,
So many problems that could have been avoided. Yeah, he's definitely a tragic character, but definitely a villain. You're absolutely right. It's good to include him in the antagonist. There's probably another character that I could include, but I'm consciously refusing to include in antagonist, but we'll definitely talk about him.
I think I have an idea for you, precious.
Yeah, you do. You got it. Sauron maybe in particular, but really all of these antagonists together. How do you think they do as antagonists? Do you think they do a good job, bad job? How do you feel? We've kind of talked a little bit about it, but how do you feel about how they do as antagonists?
I mean, I think they're pretty good villains, you know. You are disgusted by them, you're afraid of them, you know. It's just something where I don't know what more you can ask for in a villain, you know? Like, they're intimidating, they're evil, you know?
Yeah, I think they do great. I think all four of them even do great as antagonists. I think they can even serve a little, like, distinct pieces even of that antagonist puzzle, if you will. There's something about the fact that Sauron, part of his goal is to actually get them to come to him. So it's not like he's a villain that needs to attract them towards him instead of like a pure aggressive villain. There's something cool about that, especially with a main character who is adventurous.
Right.
They match up well.
Yeah.
Almost in the worst way for Frodo, who's naturally adventurous and then just getting this beckoning call the whole time towards Sauron.
Yeah, for sure.
They're interesting. They're all interesting.
For sure. It's interesting too, like, just that, like, even with Sauron, like, it's something where he's definitely evil, but in some ways he's human too, because there's like a part where Gandalf is talking with Aragorn, and he says to Aragorn, like, yes, you know, Sauron is powerful, but he's not yet above fear. Doubt ever gnaws at him. And, like, it's something where, like, when he finds out that Aragorn, you know, is going to, as Aragorn's rising up as the heir of Numenor and as king, Sauron rushes his plan forward to take out Minas Tirith. He says, we'll raze Minas Tirith to the ground before we see a king on the throne of Gondor. He will not risk, you know, the people of Middle-earth uniting under one banner. You know, like, there's just this kind of idea that, you know, Sauron's a big bad guy, but even he is prone to fear and to doubt as well. Yeah. And so he kind of,
Yeah. It makes him interesting. It makes him more interesting than if he was just a big bad guy in a tower. That he has these kind of fears and plans. And it's a cool way for the story to interact with him. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
So now let the floodgates open. What other characters do you want to talk about? And there are many. So we can go wherever you want to first.
Oh boy.
You go for it.
I mean, there's so many, and I feel like we've already talked about, you know, quite a few. Maybe, like, just kind of going with some of the themes that you see in the characters. So one theme I think that you see in some of the characters in Lord of the Rings is you see this theme of redemption from mistakes. I think three characters that really bring that out are Faramir, Boromir, and Theoden, in many ways.
Yeah.
You know, with Faramir, you know, he starts off by, you know, he encounters Frodo and Sam in the wild, and in the movies he tries. This doesn't happen in the books, so in the books Faramir doesn't do this, but in the movie he tries to take the ring back to Gondor. He wants to give it to his father, because his father's a jerk, but he figures, hey, if I give him this mighty gift, then maybe he'll see, you know, maybe it'll be a chance for me to show my quality.
Yeah.
And so he almost does that, but Sam finally gets through to him that, like, hey, the ring drove your brother mad. This is not a good idea. And so there's kind of this redemption for Faramir of, in the end, he does the right thing and he sets them free and says, go with the goodwill of all men. So he has that redemption from his mistake, and later on too, he's redeemed from his father's madness. He's saved by Pippin. So he's saved from his father's mistake as well. With Boromir also, you see redemption. Like his is a major one. That like you see him getting corrupted by the ring from the very beginning at the Council of Elrond, and eventually he does try to take the ring from Frodo. But in the end, he realizes what he's done. In the end, he says, you know what, I may have made that mistake, but I am going to defend these hobbits. And he does end up, giving his life to defend Merry and Pippin, even though they get carried off. And there's kind of that redemption for him of, like Aragorn, as Boromir lay dying, like Aragorn comes to him, and Boromir's like, forgive me, I shouldn't have tried to take the ring from him. And Aragorn says, like, no, you've died with honor. You've done well by your people. And there's just kind of that powerful moment of like Aragorn affirming Boromir, saying, you've atoned for your mistake.
That was one of the most powerful moments, and I'm jumping the shark a little bit here. But that was a huge moment, I think. And like this idea of Boromir does make this huge mistake, and then realizes it, and is right away, spends no time, but gets up and does the right thing. Mm-hmm. There's not this like, I'm trying to think of the right word. There's not like, I think oftentimes when I find myself having done the wrong thing, it is difficult. It's very difficult for me to even then just turn all the way around, right? And adjust back to what I should do without like feeling strange about it, but just being able to recognize I was wrong. I know what's right, and I'm just going to do it, no matter what that like looks like or is perceived as. And it's really impactful. I like really related with Boromir on that. I have to assume I'm supposed to, but it was very good. Not to derail your train.
Oh no, you're right though. It shows that Boromir does have a nobility, that even it's kind of there's the idea that yes, men. Boromir himself even says it to Aragorn, like, yes, in men there's frailty, but there is courage and there's strength also. Mm-hmm. And like it kind of, you see that played out in Boromir, that there's the frailty of trying to take the ring, but there's also the courage of being willing to stand up for the hobbits and even give his life for the hobbits. It shows his nobility.
I teared up 3 times through this process. That was one of the times.
Boromir's death hits hard.
Yeah.
It hits so hard because it's just one of those things where, because of how he redeems himself in that way, you're just like, oh, why? Why does he yes, he did the wrong thing, but he turned around and did the right thing. So I'll be curious to hear what your other 2 moments are, because that's one moment that always makes me tear up as well, as when the departure of Boromir, as it's called in the books.
Oh yeah. Oh, we'll get there. Don't you worry about it. We'll definitely get to the other 2.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry. I derailed your whole thing here.
No, you're totally fine. The only other thing I was going to say about the theme of redemption, kind of along the lines of Boromir's, Theoden also, I think, has a similar arc in that, he starts off as, he's under the curse of Saruman, and, his mind is poisoned, and he loses his son, Theodred. Mm-hmm. And it's something where, at Helm's Deep, you know, he makes, in many ways, it seems like he makes a mistake by leading the people to Helm's Deep. He suffers tremendous losses there. You know, if it weren't for Aragorn, you know, they would have lost. And then I think the low moment for Theoden is when he goes to, they go and confront Saruman. By the way, you probably didn't watch the extended edition.
I did not.
So in the extended edition, there is actually a scene where they confront Saruman at the top of Orthanc.
Huh.
So you actually get to see a little bit of closure with Saruman. And one thing that Saruman does is he starts off, trying to sweet talk Theoden, trying to say like, oh, we've had peace in the past. Can't we have peace again? He's trying to put a spell on him and trying to get him to be like, oh, don't worry about it. We can just smooth things over. And Theoden has none of it. He's like, we'll have peace when your body hangs from a noose for the sport of your own crows. That's when we'll have peace.
I really like Theoden. I liked him before I knew that, and I like him more now.
Oh, he's great. He's a powerful character. But the thing is, so after Saruman realizes he can't sweet talk Theoden anymore, then he just lets loose. And one of the things that Saruman says to Theoden, very angrily, he says, "You are a lesser son of greater sires." And it just you can see it kind of grate on Theoden's ears, because he kind of feels like, he doesn't have a son anymore. Like there's no one to carry on his family line anymore. The Rohan is, weaker than it was when he first became king. He's an old king now. And there's kind of this, and he says to Eowyn, it wasn't Theoden of Rohan who led the people to victory at Helm's Deep. But
that's a great quote, by the way. There's tons of them in these movies. That's one of them.
There are. But eventually it's something where he has this opportunity. We know that he's not very happy about Gondor, but he has this opportunity to say, we're going to make a difference. And he leads the armies of Rohan into the siege of Gondor, into the battle of the Pelennor Fields, and the Rohirrim just go to town. Like, if it weren't for the Rohirrim, Gondor would be lost.
Yeah.
And yes, Theoden ends up losing his life due to the Witch King.
Yeah.
But Eowyn, defends his body, and Eowyn and Merry combine together so that Theoden can die with honor. And there's kind of a redemption there too. That the most powerful line, and this line this is a moment that makes me tear up too. Theoden's death also hits so hard. He says, I will now go to my fathers, in whose mighty company I will not now fear being ashamed. And you're just like, there's a redemption there.
Yeah.
That, he does not need to be ashamed. He fought valiantly and bravely, and he did the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like Theoden. I honestly, he for real was in I don't want to tip my hand here, but he is in the running for my favorite character in the whole series. I really liked him when I was going through it. There's a very heavy theme of this redemption. These honestly, a lot of times men, now that I'm thinking about it, making these mistakes, but not always, because I can think of Pippin. What did you call the black ball?
The Palantir.
Yes, he steals it from Gandalf in the middle of the night, and that's another
redemption. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and where he's then is redeemed through that.
We've been strangely fortunate. Yeah, I think of Gandalf's line. We've been strangely fortunate. Pippin saw a glimpse of the enemy's plan.
Yeah, and even There's a heavy theme of that throughout for sure, but I'll talk about ones I don't have as much to say about, and you can hop in. Legolas and Gimli. I'm gonna take them together. So I remember watching these movies in high school, right? I thought these guys were a much bigger part of this story than I thought they were this time. Not that they're play no part. It's just they're almost more comic relief sometimes. And first of all, I loved it every time. I love their dynamic together.
The banter back and forth, yeah.
As they're in battles, Legolas is like shooting guys down, counting.
Yeah.
Like so Gimli can hear him.
And then Gimli is like, that still only counts as one.
When he takes
When
down
he takes down a huge freaking
Yeah.
elephant
Yes.
with a fortress on top of it.
Yeah, and he's like, that still only counts as one. I thought they were really funny. I liked them like in all the battles. It provided like a little bit of comic relief, which honestly you kind of need in some of these more tense scenarios and stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as like story elements, they're not super like they're not super needed almost. I hesitate to say that. It's almost like they're like, we want like a elf and a dwarf to be here and have fun. They're gonna be fun. They're gonna have fun fighting orcs. That's what they're gonna do. I don't know if you thought any more about those two or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where, like, in the books, Legolas and Gimli are chosen because the Fellowship needs to have representation from each of the races that are present at the Council of Elrond. So Legolas agrees to go for the elves, and Gimli agrees to go for the dwarves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something where they do a lot of comic relief, and some people hate that. I've heard some people who are just like, oh, they ruined Legolas, and especially Gimli. Like, you know, they're these noble warriors, and you just reduce them to a laughing stock. And I'm like, well, yes, you know, they do make them more humorous.
Yeah.
But I guess, you know, it's something where also, like, maybe in some ways in a plot sense, maybe they weren't needed, but, like, in those battles, they definitely were.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just something where, like, with Legolas, like, he literally takes down, like, half the enemy's army, you know, just by doing what he's doing. And Gimli probably takes down... Well, Legolas took down 42 at Helm's Deep. Gimli was sitting pretty at 43, so...
First of all, they're definitely great fighters. And I think I've been guilty of this, right? Like, I've thought this about characters, that, like, the humor takes away some of, like, that nobility aspect that we kind of see in Theoden and Boromir and stuff like that. I absolutely think that both Gimli and Legolas do have this nobility and this, like, warrior's pride. Especially Gimli has that warrior's pride.
Oh, yeah.
Legolas is no joke. Like you said, looks like he takes down half the army in pretty much every battle he's in.
Right.
So, like, I get why people would say that, but I definitely disagree. I think that the humor just makes them funny. And if anything, it makes me think that they're almost taking this less seriously than everyone around them, which may point to the fact that they're even stronger than the rest of the people. But I love that one moment where he has it's Aragorn. Aragorn throws him, right?
Tosses Gimli.
He looks yes, because it is Aragorn. Because he looks up at him and he's like, "Don't tell the elf."
Not a word.
It's that I loved that. But it's funny, but like he goes over there and fight, like just him and Aragorn. Fighting the whole army. Yeah, I like those two. I liked kind of the levity they brought, and they were cool. They were both very cool.
Yeah, they're cool characters. Like, you know that you have to respect them whenever they speak. You know, Legolas is this elf he's like thousands of years old and has wisdom and experience, and Gimli is just like, he's the son of Gloin, who is in The Hobbit. He's a fierce warrior, and so Gimli's a stalwart warrior as well. I mean, it's something where, like, you think of that scene in Moria where he stands up on top of Balin's tomb and he's just like, "Let them come. There is still one dwarf in Moria who still draws breath," and you're like, I don't want to fight this guy. I really don't. I pity the orcs who are coming to fight him.
Yeah.
You know?
Other characters that you'd like to do you have any in particular you'd like to get? There's a couple I feel like we should probably talk about before we wrap the episode up.
Sure.
But where would you like to go next?
I guess going back to like the kingdom of Rohan, maybe we could talk a little bit about the two major women who we see in The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I guess specifically, we talked a little bit about Éowyn and how Éowyn defended, Theoden, and how she and Merry combined together to take down the Witch King. And Éowyn is just such an interesting character in that way. It's something where, Tolkien was kind of like a feminist before feminists were cool, in many ways.
It kind of seems like that with Éowyn. Definitely with Éowyn.
Like, basically, he just shows, like, hey, women can, they can kick butt, too. Women can do this sort of stuff, too. Like, and it's kind of something where, like, you see, like, at different points in the movie, Éowyn wants to prove herself. She's like, I can fight. And, and Éomer's like, no, war is a province of men, Éowyn. You shouldn't be here, or you shouldn't seek to be in war or anything like that. But Éowyn's like, we should be able to do this too. And it's something where I think was lost is that, like, the Witch King is such a big bad guy. We're talking about the Lord of the Nazgul, the one that no living man can kill. But she and Merry together, a woman and a hobbit, they come together to put this baddie to rest.
Did the Witch King of Angmar say that no living man can kill? Oh my word! You just said the quote, and it's gone.
So it was said of the Witch King that no living man could kill him, and then he said that to Éowyn as he was trying to, like, basically choke her to death.
Yeah, he said that, and I said out loud, "That's no man." I was like, "I gotcha. We gotcha, Witch King."
Yeah, but that's exactly what Éowyn she says. She's, "I am no man," and that's that's such a great quote, too.
Yeah,
it's like,
you know what I like? One of the things. So, like, a lot of times I think when authors or movie directors or anything are trying to do that stereotypical, like, feminist warrior woman role, they're, like, stoic and, like, just tough, right? And unafraid of most things. One of the things I really loved about Éowyn is they're standing there in line of the battle, her and Merry, and they're both, you can see their faces, and they're scared, which is, it's realistic. Éowyn's not a coward. She's very brave, and no one would argue with that. But, like, this is real. There's, like, fear there. And that's just realistic, I think. And I love to see that, and to still see how brave they are, both of them, in the face of that fear, against the biggest bad on the whole field.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And she's real, and also too, you're kind of talking about how, a lot of times when you have a feminist hero, there's kind of this, like, they have to, like, be big and stoic and kind of. Éowyn is still very feminine. Like, she's still, very tender. She's still very compassionate. She's still, there's still a beauty and an elegance to her. It's kind of, it's interesting how she keeps her femininity, I guess, however you'd say it.
Sure.
While also breaking out of that and being the warrior and being the strong feminine presence on the battlefield as well, and having that massive role of, like, taking down literally the captain of the hosts of Mordor. Yeah. Like, literally, like, the Witch King was, like, second only to Sauron. So this was a big loss for Sauron.
Right.
To lose the Witch King.
Yeah. She's very cool.
She is awesome. Éowyn's awesome in both the books and the movies.
Yeah, she's very awesome. But you did mention the other lady.
There is Arwen as well. She's an interesting character too. She's not nearly as present in the book. She's much more present in the movies, and obviously she's not present on the battlefield like Éowyn is.
Right.
It's interesting just how she is. She also is kind of brought into the movies, I think, to add a little bit more of a feminine presence And I think she really acts a lot as kind of a foil to Aragorn in a lot of ways. Aragorn is kind of constantly doubting himself, but she kind of keeps building him up and saying, you are Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself. Yes, Isildur made the mistake of not destroying the ring when he found it and cut it off of Sauron's hand, but that doesn't mean that you'll make the same mistakes. You're not bound to that fate. And of course, she also kind of creates this love triangle between Aragorn and Éowyn, and Arwen as well.
Okay, that's real. People feel that's good. Because I was watching these movies, and I definitely felt that, but I was like, am I reading something here that other people aren't getting? Okay, that's good. There is a love triangle going on.
There is, and it's something where I feel like it's more present in the movies than it is in the books. In fact, I'm not really sure how the book handled it. In the book, like, Éowyn did like Aragorn.
Yeah.
But there's not really much said about like what Arwen was doing. Like, Arwen doesn't show up nearly as much in the books as she does in the movies. So it's kind of something where she's definitely a little bit more of an addition to the movies, but I think overall she is a good addition because she helps to be a foil to Aragorn. She helps to round out his character a little bit more, and she also creates that love triangle as well that kind of adds in a little bit of tension to the story. And it's something where she's a very graceful and elegant character as well. It's actually something, as I was sitting here thinking about it, you talked about in your first podcast you did was the Prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
And you talked about how Zipporah was kind of like this. She wasn't necessarily like in the thick of the action, but she was very supportive of Moses and was very much like right next to him.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like taking like a pastor's wife kind of approach.
Yeah, kind of.
I have to give my wife Megan credit for that one because she was the first one who coined that. She said, "Oh yeah, Zipporah was kind of being like a pastor's wife to Moses here."
Huh.
I think you could make this case for Arwen as well. That Arwen's kind of like she's the strong pastor's wife. Behind every pastor stands a strong pastor's wife, and Arwen kind of fulfills that role in some ways. She's not someone to just be brushed off.
Yeah.
By any means.
Yeah. I really love kind of her struggle too, like, with this fact, that she's in love with a human and the inevitability of his death, and like how throughout the movies how they wrestle with that.
Yeah, because you don't see that in the book as much. Like, in the books they get married and it's just kind of, you don't think the movies help to bring out the implications.
Yeah. Yes. Because, like, it is a reality. Like, her father, whose name I'm not even sure of.
Elrond.
That's not even that hard of one. Anyway, he brings out this thought of, like, he's gonna die, and then what? You're alone to mourn him forever, because you won't die. And then to later have that, like, she sees that vision of a child, and I was like, this is a good answer. This, like, and how it takes this like Elrond, who's being more, like, we might say pragmatic, right, about this, and just puts this much more optimistic spin on, like, what that love is and why it's important. I just really liked it. It was cool. It was definitely interesting.
For sure, yeah.
So now I get to pick, so I'm going to pick Gandalf. Who I legitimately think is one of the best. So I don't know how much you know about, like, archetypes and stories. So certain characters usually fit certain themes and stuff. We talked about protagonist, right? One of archetypes in stories is called the sage. And it's usually the mentor figure that pretty much everything they say you're supposed to take as true, right? He might be one of the best sage characters in all of fiction. He serves this role so well. I really like him. What do you have to say about Gandalf?
Gandalf is awesome. Like, whether it's Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf the White. I will say, like, some people like try to like compare like the Grey and the White. I'm like, they're both good. Like, the White is more serious, but he has to be. You know,
Sure.
The stakes are higher by the time you get to, you know, Gandalf the White.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's just such a sage character. He has, you know, these great witty sayings. Like, it's like you said, you know, you just know that like what he's saying is like you need to take it to heart.
Yeah.
Like literally, like probably half of like the most quotable lines from Lord of the Rings are probably from Gandalf.
Yeah.
And like and it's something where it's interesting that, you know, he's loyal to the good. You know, he's someone who's old and ancient. I mean, literally, he's like I forget exactly how old he is, but he's older than some of the elves. Like, he's like thousands of years old.
Yeah.
Like, he was sent into Middle Earth a long, long time ago.
Huh.
But he is like, he's loyal to the good, you know. Unlike Sauron, or unlike Sauron, also unlike Saruman, you know, he sees the evil and the power of Sauron.
Yeah.
But he says, we're not joining him. We're going to fight against him, and we're going to defeat him, because good must triumph over evil.
Right.
You know, he says to Frodo, you know, there are other powers that work in this world besides the will of evil. And you're just kind of that idea that, you know, stay faithful to the good. That's what true wisdom is. Staying faithful to the good, because knowing that good will be, you know, will triumph in the end. Which, by the way, you could make a biblical parallel with that.
Yeah, you definitely could. There's a couple of these. Yeah, I really like that he's jovial at times. He can joke. He's fun, not just like smart and stoic.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a person, especially like you said. Honestly, I wasn't looking for distinct differences between the Gray and the White, to be fair, but I didn't pick up a ton when I was watching. But he's just like, I love his ability to still be serious when he needs to be serious, but not have to be all the time. That's cool. It's cool to see that in a mentor figure, and I think that's like true to real life mentor figures. You have a lot of fun with people who are your mentors.
Right, yeah.
And it's not just all serious all the time. And I think he does a good job of that.
Yeah.
I'm like sensing a general theme throughout this, and we might touch this a little later too, but in a different episode. But that like this, there's a huge bent toward optimism in this whole world. I mean, like Gandalf, you know, there are more powers than evil at work in this world. This is an optimistic view of this tough situation that they're in. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sam now.
Yes.
Because he might be one of the most optimistic characters I've ever seen in my life. How do you feel about Sam?
Sam, where can I start about Sam? So, I think this is one of your questions later on I saw, but Sam is by far my favorite character.
No way. He's my favorite too.
Yes.
Well, we don't have to ask that now.
There we go. Like, he's the friend that we all want and that we should all aspire to be. He's the guy that is loyal to the end. That, you know, what more can you say about him? That he's the friend that you want to have a Sam. You want to have a Sam in your life. You want to have someone who says, I am going to go with you. I will follow you even to the crack of doom. You know, that I'll stay by your side. I made Mr. Gandalf a promise, Mr. Frodo. A promise. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to.
Yeah.
Another scene that makes me cry up.
Oh,
Tear up and cry, by the way. He's awesome. Like, just his loyalty, the way that, you know, he sticks up for what's good. He is optimistic too. I mean, Frodo says to him, "Nothing ever dampens your spirits, does it, Sam?" It's like, well, those rain clouds might, but
I know, it's so funny. It's like a joke. It's so good. He picks. They're on the mountain. They're there, and Frodo can't even walk. And he's like, I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you. That's so good.
it is.
It's an incredible. Picks him up, puts him on his back, and just trudges as best he can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't forget too, Frodo gets stung by Shelob, and he's getting wrapped up in spider webs.
Yeah.
Sam's just there, let him go, you filth. And he's going up against a spider that's literally many times bigger than he is.
Yes.
And he's just like, come at me, bro. Let's do this.
That spider.
Oh man.
Let me tell you, I forgot all about that spider.
I think we just block it out because it's so scary.
Shelob
is the reason that I hate spiders.
I don't blame you. I literally just forgot this was in this movie until I was like, he was in the cave, and I was like, okay, what's in this cave? I forget about what's in here. And then I saw a spider web, and it all came back. I was like, oh no, it's a big spider. That's what's in the cave. I knew that. I just didn't want to remember. That is a freaky spider.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. And we don't have to get into this now, but it's like most giant spiders are usually tarantula-like, so they're hairy and they're a little less. That's recluse-like. She's bald, she just. Oh, it's the worst kind of giant spider.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, not that she's a very vital character, but Sam's bravery in that moment is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would have done. I don't know. I just would want to be dead, I think. But yeah, Sam is an incredible character. Definitely my favorite character also. Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. He's the friend we all really want, he's the best friend,
Yeah, loyal and true blue. And yeah. Tolkien once said there's a pretty I guess somewhat famous line in the books where he says, "Faithless is he who says farewell when the road darkens." And that's the exact opposite of Sam. Sam is the one who stays loyal even in the darkest of moments.
Yeah.
He stays loyal to Frodo no matter what.
Yeah. I love Sam.
He's awesome. He really is.
I love him.
And the way he gets drawn into the story too is great.
Oh, I think we talked about that, on one of our calls, where, he gets, pulls him through the window, and he's like, I promise I was dropping no eaves.
Yeah, it's confound it all, Samwise Gamgee, have you been eavesdropping? I ain't dropping no eaves, so honest.
It's, so good. It's one of those times where, the Middle-earth speak just is, it ends up being very funny. It works so well. Yeah. Oh, it's really good. So, there's one more character that I want to make sure we talk about. Aragorn. It's probably pretty important that we talk about Aragorn at least a little bit.
I mean, he's just the king, that's all.
Yeah, just the king. What'd you think about Aragorn? What do you think about Aragorn?
Aragorn's really cool. He's a cool character. And it's interesting that they make him a little bit more of a dynamic character, I think, in the movies than they do in the books. Because in the books, Aragorn... It's interesting, because in the books, Aragorn is much less hesitant about becoming the king. His sword, Anduril, is reforged in Rivendell, and he has that sword in the books, even as they set out from Rivendell, as the Fellowship sets out. Whereas in the movies, he doesn't get the sword until he's at Dunharrow, when they're about to go to the Pass of the Dead. But it's interesting that, Aragorn's kind of... He has this hesitancy in the movies of, I don't know if I can be the king. There's weakness. I'd rather just stay as a ranger out in the wild. And eventually, Elrond gives him the sword and says, you need to put aside the ranger. You need to become who you were born to be. The person who Arwen has been trying to encourage him to be, the person who Elrond has tried to encourage him to be, and just it's kind of something where there's kind of this journey, and it's kind of something where, but when he does take up the sword, Andril, and when he does, go through the paths of the dead and say, you see like this, I summon you to fulfill your oath, and like you just see him like start to take up that more kingly, approach, and like he's had a few moments before that, but like you really start to see him take up that authority.
Yeah.
And he leads, the host of the dead into the battle at Minas Tirith and everything, and he also takes up that leadership as he's, as they're deliberating and as they go to the Black Gate to fight against Sauron and draw out his armies. And once again, I'm a pastor, I'm a Christian, so I approach things from a Christian worldview. I think there's once again a biblical parallel you can make with Aragorn in the movies, and that when you look in Scripture, when you see God calling people to do different things, a lot of times people tend to shy away and they're like, oh God, I don't know, like whether it's someone like Moses, whether it's someone like Gideon, or there are plenty of examples of different people throughout Scripture. They kind of are like very hesitant. They're like, I don't think I can do it. But then God empowers them through the Holy Spirit, or through different ways. He gives them the strength to do what He has called them to do, and they're able to. And when they do that, like God uses them in mighty and powerful ways. And Aragorn, I feel like, is a parallel of that. Of that. There's a parallel there between how Aragorn is hesitant, but then when he decides to live into his identity, he takes up that authority, and he becomes a very powerful, warrior and king. And I think God, does the same thing with us. And it's not our power, but it's His power. But if we're willing to step into who God is calling us to be, that's when God works most powerfully through us. So that's my shameless theological plug into the podcast. So
that's good. I'm glad. That was a great way to put Aragorn's kind of theme there. Is there anyone else that you must talk about? Because I don't want to cut you off. There are other names if you need to. But what do you think?
I think we can, whatever names you want to discuss. We think she knows one
Oh my word!
that needs to be talked about, precious.
I was about to just not. I was this close. The good thing I looked at the list. Also, you did that.
It's not a very good impression, but it's okay. Anyway.
Smeagol / Gollum, whatever you want to call him. What do you think about him? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I have several.
I have to quote Gandalf. Again, he's got such great quotes. Smeagol's life is a sad story. He's a very tragic character. That he was just Megan, my wife Megan, and I have talked about it. Megan's like, the beginning of the Return of the King always makes me so sad, because Smeagol's just this hobbit just out fishing with his friend out on the river. He's not doing anything. He's not hurting anyone. And then the ring, his friend Deagle finds the ring, and then Smeagol sees it, and he's immediately captivated by it, and it turns Smeagol into a murderer, and for 500 years he has the ring, and it just corrupts him, and it's just sad to see how the ring takes hold of him.
Yeah.
And how it doesn't let go of him even after he loses the ring. Gandalf talks about he hates and loves the ring. He hates and loves himself. And it's just kind of this. He's a very tragic character. Yeah. However, as we've said with some of the other villains, there is evil in him. It's
Yeah,
kind of
no
you see this,
kidding.
and it's something where in Smeagol it's really divided. In Gollum, it's divided into two personalities of Smeagol and Gollum, where Smeagol's more of like he was once the Hobbit, and he misses that. And then there's Gollum, who's the evil. I must have the ring. We need to get it back, kind of thing. Like there's some goodness there, but he's still evil. And it's something where you feel bad because you see Smeagol come out at different points. Like you're like, okay, he's not that bad. You pity him. You feel bad for him. But then there's the Gollum, and you're just like, this guy is just bad news.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I hadn't included him on the antagonist list is I genuinely felt bad for him almost the entire time. Mm-hmm. And I think you're 100% right. He's not good. There's not a lot of good here. One of the things I thought was interesting about him, though, as he's having this conversation with himself several times, or Smeagol's having a conversation with Gollum, clearly, it seems like, the relative kindness that Frodo shows him is bringing out this, like, Smeagol that's there, that does want, like, that some form of love and camaraderie, and this is valuable. And then at one point, like, gets almost Gollum to silence himself, at least for a little bit. Right. And so, like, I can't help but wonder if there's something here to say about, like, the ability of kindness and love to affect even, like, Smeagol/Gollum, who is so warped in this, like, desire for the ring, that he's, like, physically transformed, like, morphed into like a different looking thing.
Yeah.
But kindness's ability even to pull some of that out.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately unsuccessful, which is, I think, also interesting. That it might not be that Smeagol wins outright, that Gollum does come back, and his end is not great, right? No. And so, I mean, in a way, it's kind of good he came back, but who knows what Frodo would have done. But
yeah, just if I can do a quick side note about that's something that's left out in the movies, by the way, but it is talked about in the books, is that, like, Gandalf says of Gollum, like, so there's a great conversation between Gandalf and Frodo where Frodo says, it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill Gollum when he had the chance. And Gandalf says, pity? It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Do not be so quick to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends. My heart tells me that Gollum still has some part to play in all of this, for good or for evil, before this is over. And at the end of the movie, you see, at the end of the Return of the King, you see there was a reason that Gollum showed up, because apart from Gollum, the ring probably would not have been destroyed.
Yeah.
Gollum did have a part to play in this.
Yeah.
Before the end, Gandalf was right. So that's just a really cool feature about, you're talking about, how Gollum meets his end, but, like, that's kind of like that foreshadowing you have in the Fellowship of the Ring, that it's fulfilled in the Return of the King. It's pretty cool.
He was a very interesting character to me, I think, throughout his whole time, especially with Sam and Frodo. Definitely felt very bad for this corruption, but he's not free from this guilt at all. And yet at the same time, it's so interesting that there's a part for him to play, and this ends in his demise, but it's so vital that he does that. Yeah.
For sure.
It's very interesting. I think he's a very interesting character and a really cool addition to the cast. He's very interesting. I get why people are so kind of intrigued by him. Okay, now, is there any other characters that you want to talk about? Now that I haven't missed a glaringly obvious character,
can't think of anyone else. So.
Yeah, I'm reading the list. I didn't miss any glaringly obvious. Treebeard's cool. That's all I got.
Yes.
I thought he was neat.
Like, it's something where, like, with a lot of characters, we could spend so much time talking about them, but there's so many characters,
Yes.
like, it's hard to talk about all of them and get into all of them, so.
Right. Yeah. But this was good. This was good. So this is episode 1 of our 3-episode Lord of the Rings month here in the month of May. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Daniel, for doing this with me and doing 2 more episodes with me. Next... Nope.
I was just going to say thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be able to talk about it, and couldn't have a better person to talk about it with, so.
Oh, thanks, man. Next month, I'm going to have my friend Cliff on, and we're going to be doing a show about the video game The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. So if you have any questions that you want to send in about that for me and Cliff to answer, you can email me at lifeslegendspod@gmail.com. No punctuation at all. Just lifeslegendspod@gmail.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Life's Legends. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, savor your story.